Want to sleep like a pro? There's a reason 80% of NFL players choose Sleep Number smart beds. These game-changing beds automatically contour to your head, neck, and shoulders, delivering MVP-level comfort all night long. Perfect for post-workout recovery, you can adjust the firmness whenever you need, while the climate-cool technology keeps you up to 15 degrees cooler. Plus, it's like having a sleep coach. The bed learns your patterns and provides personalized insights for better sleep. Why choose a Sleep Number smart bed? So you can choose your ideal comfort on either side. The only bed that lets you make each side firmer or softer whenever you like. Your Sleep Number setting. And now, it's the Sleep Number 4th of July sale. Save over $600 on the Sleep Number P5 King Smart Bed, the lowest price of the season. Limited time, exclusively at a Sleep Number store near you. See store or sleepnumber.com for details.
Welcome to the Pint Glass Football Podcast.
We are excited to be joined by JP Acosta, who's a writer at SB Nation, covers both the NFL and college football. JP, welcome to the show.
Thank you guys for having me back on. It was really fun talking football last time. I'm glad to be back on.
Yeah, we're excited to have you back, man. And a lot to get to. You've been putting out a lot of great stuff at SB Nation. Let's start in the NFL here. And right now, with some of the mini camps and everything going on, obviously there's been a lot of talk about some of these star players holding out contract deals in place. You mentioned the four big stars, Trey Hendrickson for the Bengals, TJ Watt, Terry McLaurin, Jonnu Smith. So let's start with Trey Hendrickson. How urgent do you think it should be for Cincinnati about extending him? Like, how pressing is this issue for them right now?
I think it's extremely pressing, and it's for multiple reasons. Not only is Trey Hendrickson one of the best pass rushers in the NFL, he is also vital to their success as a team. You need to have your best pass rusher ready, especially for a Bengals team that is looking to win the Super Bowl right now. This is not a situation where this team is trying to rebuild for the future. In that case, I would understand because Hendrickson is 31 years old. You're probably not going to pay him top of the line money. But this team isn't looking to win 5-10 years from now. This team is looking to win right now. And they still have the ability to go do that. I think that the Hendrickson holdout on top of the Shamar Stewart holdout, I would really be desperate to get one of those, hopefully both of those done soon, because those are two really critical pieces to a defensive line that needs their pass rush pop.
Right. And, the Shamar Stewart thing alone, I know myself and Brad weren't necessarily high on Shamar Stewart coming out. However, his stance actually makes perfect sense. He's not actually asking for anything ridiculous. He's not saying, give me a fully guaranteed contract. He's basically saying, give me the standard contract that you gave those that came before me, a la Miles Murphy, which I think is actually fair in that sense. I think the Trey Hendrickson thing, I believe that they'll do something probably right before training camp, basically give him maybe an extra $5-7 million and then put the other 3 in incentives that if he hits, and then perhaps let him walk at the end of the year.
And the Stewart thing, like you said, it's incredibly fascinating because Shamar Stewart's right.
Yeah.
You should pay me what you paid these guys. Not only, it's not like Miles Murphy was drafted in 2020 or in like 2015 or something. This happened recently. This is not something where it's like you're trying to get us to set a new precedent for a new era of football. This is something they just did. And for the Bengals, who have a history of being notoriously cheap, it's not a great look for them to constantly be trying to undercut their own players, especially when it comes time to sign free agents to help this team, because nobody's going to want to keep a contract with them. They're always like, they're the franchise that has a lot of money but runs it like a mom and pop shop. And you can't do that in the NFL, especially if you want to win right now.
So let's stay in the AFC North here, because you mentioned TJ Watt in your article as well. I think his case here is a little more complicated. I don't think the Steelers are in that same Super Bowl window, like you said, with the Bengals. But this guy is a premium player, one of the best defenders, one of the best pass rushers in the game. So with him, how do you think Pittsburgh needs to proceed here? Because they have a lot of money tied up into that defense, but obviously he's a very, very high-level player. Is he a guy, because of his age and where Pittsburgh is as a franchise, should they be looking to reset the market with a guy like TJ Watt, or what is your stance on that situation?
So the TJ Watt thing is probably the most fascinating one to me, because like you said, Watt is 31 years old. The Steelers are not exactly in a position to say we're like one of the contenders for a Super Bowl right now. But it's so fascinating to me because TJ Watt wants to be paid like the highest paid defensive player in the NFL, the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. He wants the same contract Myles Garrett got with the same amount of guaranteed money that Myles Garrett got. And I just don't think he's that caliber of player right now. Like he's lost a step. This isn't saying that he's a bad player, but he has clearly lost a step over the last few years. And I think the Steelers see that, they're just like, we're not going to pay you top of the line money. So if I were the Steelers, if you could come around to, I mean, right now, Nick Bosa's at $34 million a year. Josh Hines-Allen is at 28. If you can get closer to that Nick Bosa area of like 30 to 33, I think that'd be a great deal for both sides. If you can keep it below Max Crosby, who's at $35.5 million a year, I think that's a great deal. But I'm really fascinated by what the Steelers do because this defensive core is aging. Cam Hayward's not getting any younger. Minkah Fitzpatrick is coming off a down year, and they just, in order to try and keep the Super Bowl window that they think they have open, they signed Darius Slay, who got benched last season. So I just am so curious about what the Steelers actually want to be because I don't even think they know.
I understand TJ Watt's stance, and from his stance, I think he's right. Myself and Myles Garrett came out, if I'm TJ Watt, we came out in the same exact draft. My production in just straight numbers is basically still the same for the most part. Sure, Aaron Donald in between us somewhere, and either one of us three have been the defensive player of the year or top 2 or top 3 for defensive player of the year. So I understand his stance. To the point about the Steelers and what you say, you don't think they know what they're doing. I think there is infighting going on in the Steelers front office. You have a second-year GM coming off of Kevin Colbert, who was the standard there for a while. And you have Omar Khan, who's come in here and done things a little bit differently. I believe Omar Khan is in there saying, we need to reset. Like, we've been mid for the past, since the last 5 years of Ben Roethlisberger. We've been mid. We've been one and done, or we've just been winning, and we always find ourselves anywhere between 18 and 32, which you not necessarily say you can't get a quarterback. You're just on that back end where the quarterbacks are not really falling when you want one. So I think there's infighting that has nothing to do with the players. I think it's infighting on a new GM regime that's trying to talk to the old guard of the ownership to say, we need to reset. However, Steeler football and probably Steeler football nation is not used to resetting, going all the way back to Bill Cowher. They're always used to being right there on the cusp or in the playoffs. So they don't understand, you know what? Trade TJ Watt, let Cam Hayward retire, retain who you want to retain, and just go from there. And in the next draft class where you perhaps have an Arch Manning, or the next 2 draft classes where you have an Arch Manning, you can possibly get a quarterback, not necessarily him, but the other guys around him as well if you don't get that high of a pick, but to go and do that. So now we're here with Aaron Rodgers and basically perhaps wash, rinse, repeat with a one and done again.
And I think you're onto something there with the Steelers being stuck between 2 different worlds. And it's really a whole microcosm of their offseason. If this team wanted to put themselves in prime position for a quarterback, they're not trading day 2 picks this year for DK Metcalf. But if you're a team trying to be competitive and stack all their chips into this season, this one last run, you probably don't trade George Pickens. So it feels like they're kind of stuck between 2 areas. What team do they want to be? And because of all that feeling stuck, they've kind of locked themselves in place. So now, if the Steelers do what the Steelers do, which is go 9-8, 10-7, flame out in the wild card, you're picking 21-22 again. You're going to have to sacrifice future first-round capital to move up for a quarterback, and then you're putting yourself behind the 8 ball again. So I tend to agree with you, especially with the Steelers. They need to figure out what they want to do and what they want to be. And I think it kind of starts with Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan. You have to come to an agreement for what this team is going to be long term. Are you willing to sit through a year where you're kind of bad while acknowledging that you can get this thing turned back around very quickly because Mike Tomlin is one of the 10, 11 best coaches in football?
I think something to keep an eye on. If Shedeur Sanders does something with the Browns, they're going to look a little crazy continuously passing on him and then settling for the Ohio State quarterback, where they had 5 different times where they could have taken that quarterback who perhaps could have been a springboard to the future, and you passed on him because of the disagreement between the front office and in the front office and perhaps Mike Tomlin as well.
So the last 2 players I want to get to here with these offseason contracts, Terry McLaurin situation. Now, you mentioned that it surprised you. Why do you think Washington hasn't prioritized extending him yet?
Partially, I think it's because they traded for Deebo Samuel and Laramie Tunsil. So it's like you're bringing in all these new guys. But I also think it's kind of being a little wary of what the wide receiver market looks like now, with every top of the line receiver resetting the market. I don't know if you're paying Terry McLaurin top of the line receiver money, but I also think that you might want to get it done now. If you're the Commanders, you want to make sure that you get him locked up with Jaden Daniels, because they showed an incredible rapport last season. And I don't think that the contract numbers should scare off the Commanders, because I don't think Terry McLaurin's going to need top of the line money. Again, he's one of those where he's getting close to 30. It's not always going to look the way it did last season. So you don't necessarily have to pay him at the Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase number. But I'm just confused on why they haven't done it already, considering that you have the quarterback on a rookie deal. There's nothing you need to wait for. If you know this guy is good, you want to build around him. And how you build around him is keeping your best receiver around.
I tend to agree with you there, because I think when you've got a cheap quarterback deal, you found your franchise guy, why not pay this guy? I mean, he's your number 1 receiver. He's been the number 1 guy. And to your point, I don't think you need to break the bank for him. This guy has been the number 1 receiver on some bad Washington teams with some bad quarterback play. He's finally in a good situation where the arrow is pointing up. So why not get that deal done? I'm sure he's excited to stay at this point.
Well, I think so JP, let me ask you a question. Give me a number.
Oh, man. I think it's going to be Jamar Chase is at 40 and a half per year.
Yeah.
Justin Jefferson's at 40 or 35.
35.
DK just got 32.
That's the key. And that's the key.
I would be fine giving Terry McLaurin 32. I think he's a better receiver than DK Metcalf. But again, you want to get him around that number before all the other receivers coming up behind him get paid. All the big name guys, you're thinking about Puka Nacua, who is going to make a lot of money. You're thinking about guys like, this is probably way in the future, but Brian Thomas Jr. going to make a lot of money. You're thinking about the next crop of receivers. I think Drake London is going to be up for a contract in the near future. Garrett Wilson.
Yep.
These guys are going to break the top of the line number. You don't want to get caught looking like what the Bengals had to do with paying Jamar Chase $40 million, then paying T. Higgins $30 million, because you could have done this a lot earlier. That is how teams end up like the Bengals, like the Cowboys, where they're always reactive, instead of being like the Eagles, who got A.J. Brown at what is now a bargain at 32, and you got Devontae Smith at an even bigger bargain at 25. So I think if they want to get out ahead of this early, it's going to do them a lot more good in the long run.
Right. So they're going to have to pay him. I mean, and I always I look at it from the CEO view, and then I look at it from the player view. I'm coming in there. My number's 33.5, because basically DK Metcalf is at 32.9. So that's 33. Like we just agreed, he's better. So you need to give me 33.5. I can't be close to him. I have to be making more than. So that puts me at top 4 in terms of the wide receiver pool. I think from the front office side, they're viewing that they need to go and get a pass rusher. And I think they have their eyes on perhaps a TJ Watt, or even perhaps a Michael Parsons, depending on what Dallas decides to do, because I think they've also dug themselves in a hole, getting George Pickens, who is on his last year for a deal. And then you have Micah, who is going to set the market again for edge rushers. So yeah, I think they're looking at that saying, do we want to give this guy top 4 receiver money when receiver is kind of fluid? Not saying that Terry McLaurin's not a guy, but the receivers have been kind of fluid in the NFL. Like if I put my money in my quarterback and my offensive line and I get a defense, can my guy rise above the top and do a lot of things without paying this wide receiver top end money?
I can definitely see that as well, but I think a lot of teams are going to look at what happened with the Texans last season and CJ Stroud and kind of go, we got to keep this core around. We got to make sure that things remain similar for this guy, because as much as I love Jaden Daniels, he is not the veteran in that room yet. You can't just throw people around Jane Daniels and he will turn it into a Super Bowl caliber team. You want to keep the guy that you have a good rapport with. And also, like you said, he's one of their leaders. He's been with that team through thick and thin. I could see them wanting to go out and add a big name pass rusher either this offseason or next. But if they do it and choose to not pay Terry McLaurin, that'll probably end up being a bad look to the rest of the locker room who saw this guy grow up with them and be one of their vocal leaders.
Yeah, who knows? Could be Trey Hendrickson or TJ Watt for that matter, guys that we just talked about, depending on how those contract situations work out. Now, before we shift gears here, the last guy I want to briefly touch on here was Jonnu Smith with the Miami Dolphins. Is this more about the fit in Miami's offense, or do you think it has more to do with money?
It's tough because I want to say both, but I think the Jonnu Smith Miami thing is really weird. First of all, I don't really know what the Dolphins are going to be this upcoming season, which makes them one of the most interesting teams in the NFL, but they're kind of stuck in the point of we have to win to keep our jobs, but also acknowledging that this team just doesn't have it juice-wise. They don't have the talent on the at the top end or through the depth of that defense, and then you're trusting in a quarterback who unfortunately can't stay healthy, and you're retooling the offensive line. Teron Armstead just got hurt. I think the Dolphins are looking at that Jonnu Smith contract and going, I don't know if I want to pay that for a guy who doesn't really help in the run game. He's more just a body. But with as much 12 personnel and 21 personnel as they run, you could see him being an option in the underneath passing game, which is where he really excelled last season. I just don't know if that underneath passing game is worth resetting the market or paying top of the line tight end money to. So I could see this souring quickly and them ending up trading Jonnu Smith because this team just doesn't have it. It's unfortunate because of all the hype that surrounded the Dolphins and what they can be for it to end the way it's possibly ending soon. But this team just doesn't have it, unfortunately.
Right. They're a mess. I don't know. We were talking about what we just said with the Steelers. I think the Dolphins are in that same space where they don't know who they are. They built more, from my perspective, a college-style team, just speed, but they don't have the defense to keep up with what they're trying to do on offense, number one. But I agree with you with everything with Jonnu Smith. And before we move on, your thoughts on Jalen Ramsey and the trade market around him?
I think a Jalen Ramsey trade is going to happen right before training camp. I think he's one of those veterans that could help a playoff team out. I think a team like the Rams, a reunion there would make a lot of sense as just sort of an impactful veteran, can play corner or safety. I think safety might be in his best role as he enters his old age, but I think he's still going to be an impactful player. I could definitely see him going for maybe a day 3 picks because, again, it's the age, So this Miami team is going to look very different from last season.
Yeah, that team, to your point, it's a lot of sizzle, not a lot of steak. You've got this coach who's a great play caller. I'm not sure he's a great head coach. I'm not sure he's a great culture builder. And it just feels like this team has lacked something since he's been there, even though they've had an explosive offensive times, even though it looked like they were moving in the right direction. I'm with you. I think it's starting to come apart quickly. Now, I want to shift to another article that you wrote recently that I was really, really fascinated with. Michael Penix. And you did really a in-depth film breakdown of Michael Penix and what you saw from him last year. Limited action, but you did a really great job of looking at the plays and really looking at what he does well. We know he's coming into this year as the starter. And they're hoping that he can be the future franchise piece for them at that position. So what stood out to you most from this rookie season tape that you saw?
I think because I looked at his completion percentage, the touchdown interceptions, I kind of expected a little bit more volatility. Like I expected there to be a little bit more highs and lows, but I really didn't get that sense from watching him play, from watching him throw the ball. I mean, if you look at those 3 interceptions that he threw, one of them was on a wrong route that Raheem Morris, Michael Penix, and I think it was Kadero Hodge or Ray McLeod after the game said, yeah, I just ran the wrong route, and he threw it right to a commander's safety. The other 2 were typical Atlanta Falcons where the ball bounced off a player's hands and ended up in the hands of the defense. But if you watch Michael Penix play, if you look at some of the advanced numbers, you saw a guy that maximized big plays while also mitigating the catastrophic. He didn't take a lot of sacks, which really impressed me because for a guy who's, I'm not going to say he's a bad athlete, but he's not a nimble quarterback by any means.
He was a true pocket guy.
Yeah, he's a true pocket passer. The way that he was able to beat pressure with his mind and with his arm really impressed me, because that's something that a lot of young quarterbacks just don't do right now. They're still trying to figure out what their answers are. It feels like Michael Penix Jr. knows what his answers are against pressure. And then it's really funny looking at some of the heat maps of a Michael Penix Jr. offense compared to Kirk Cousins, because yeah, Kirk Cousins' numbers might have a little bit of a higher success rate. He might look a little cleaner, but he's throwing the ball over the middle of the field. He's not accessing the explosive plays that they needed. If you look at Michael Penix Jr.'s heat maps, it is all on the edges of the defense. He's throwing corner routes and go routes all day. And the thing that impressed me the most was his ability to just move one defender on the edge of the defense. It was a corner in cover 2 trying to read the flat. He's able to move that defender. And I think that's something that'll be able to carry over into this season, because the Falcons offense will still be able to remain explosive.
Yeah, Brad knows this. Michael Penix was my number 2 quarterback, on right behind Caleb that year. That was the guy. I said he's the guy. Everything you said is exactly what I saw with him in college and what I expect to see him in the NFL.
Yeah, and he had a lot of starts at the college level, a guy that came in with a ton of experience, a ready-to-play starter. I think that's why the whole Kirk Cousins thing just didn't make any sense. Why are you drafting this guy? Now, in hindsight, it looks great, because now they move off Kirk Cousins. Now you've got a guy that's ready to start right away. But at the time of that draft pick, everyone, I think, was scratching their head going, why are they taking this guy? Because he wasn't a developmental prospect. This guy was, one of the most NFL-ready quarterbacks in this class, and I'm excited to see what he can do here, because you're right, he throws a beautiful deep ball, unbelievable touch, accuracy, throws on time, and he really attacks downfield. Now, a lot of pluses. Obviously, you saw a lot of things on tape that got you excited, but what are the areas that you think Penix needs to improve most? Now, once again, small sample size here, but what are some of the things that jumped out that you think he needs to work on here to kind of take that next step and become that top-tier quarterback they think he can be?
So there were a couple things that stood out. First of all, Michael Penix Jr., he is a typical closer in baseball who's got the 100-mile-an-hour fastball on the ready. He can really rifle that ball. Like I said, he accesses the edge of the field really well because he has the arm strength to fire it into those windows. Where he kind of falls apart, and I think where his mechanics kind of do him a little bit of a disservice, is over the middle of the field. And that's something where he didn't really access, whether it because he couldn't move one defender in the middle of the field where everything is just so much quicker. There's a lot more clutter over the middle of the field. It's a lot easier to move a corner than it is moving a buzzing linebacker and then trying to move a safety after that. There's just a lot more moving parts over the middle of the field. So I think if he can continue to grow in that area and just play a little faster in that area, I think that'll help unlock the offense a little bit more. And you'll see his completion percentage numbers, you'll see his success rate numbers kind of go up a little bit more because he's able to access all parts of the field. But we're talking about a guy who will probably, if we're trying to get to a 17-game sample, he won't get to 17 games until week 12 or 13 of this season. So I think what Atlanta's going to do is they're going to lean heavy into, hey man, just throw it deep. It's going to look a lot like what the Packers were very early for Jordan Love, where we're just going to hammer teams with the run game, and that will be our version of a check down. That'll be our version of the quick game, where we're just handing the ball off to Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier for 4 or 5 yards of play, and then we're just going to let Michael Penix Jr. throw the ball 40 yards downfield. It'll be explosive early in the season, but as he grows, I expect him to start adding a little bit more of that middle of the field stuff so he can continue to grow in that area and unlock different parts of his game.
Right, and I think from personnel standpoint, they're going to need to add some more wide receivers. Drake London looks like he's going to be the guy that we thought he was going to be. But to the point that you said about the middle of the field, I know we had the Water Boys on in terms of talking about Atlanta. My guy from the University of Florida, Kyle Pitts, they've got to figure out what he is and how to maximize that. Because when you talk about maximizing the middle of the field, who's perfect in a 6'7" tight end that can run 4.5? And that's I think that is more of a Kyle Pitts thing. Even though Michael Penix has to go through his growing pains, there's the Kyle Pitts thing. Are you going to come to play every day and run every route like it's your last, or are we going to get the lazy guy that we've seen the past 4 years?
And it's really tough for Pitts because Zach Robinson comes from Los Angeles. They didn't really use tight ends very much, but The spin zone of that is they've never had a tight end like Kyle Pitts, who can be such a good vertical field stretcher, which again will open up areas in the short to intermediate range for guys like Drake London, who seems to operate at his best in that area of the field. I go back to the Thursday night game against the Bucs where Kirk Cousins threw for 500 passing yards, and it was just Drake London choice routes, hammering the Bucs every single time over the middle of the field. That's something where you can access Drake London there. Darnell Mooney can continue to be explosive. So I think Kyle Pitts has to figure out where he is most effective. Is it going to be in the yards after the catch department, or is he just going to be the field stretcher? And I think he can win in both areas. Yep. It's just you have to be consistent. Yep. You have to grow with the quarterback. And from reports from out of Atlanta, it seems like he's really making an effort to get there because this might be it. This might be his last shot in Atlanta.
Contract year, yep.
Before we jump to a few other topics here, I want to briefly mention you had a short article about Detroit Lions center Frank Ragnow. 29 years old, announced his retirement recently. Look, I think this is a bigger story than people are making it. This guy is a really, really good player at a really, can I say, underrated position. How much does this change your outlook for the Lions offense in 2025, especially with Jared Goff in this elite offensive line that we've seen in Detroit the last couple of years being such a big part of their identity?
Initially, even when Ben Johnson got hired by the Bears to be their head coach, I was like, the Lions will be fine. I think they still have the offensive nucleus around to continue to be a very good offense. And I still do think they can be a very good offense. The Frank Ragnow retirement sort of worries me. It worries me a lot, actually. If you look up the numbers for Frank Ragnow on the field versus Frank Ragnow off the field, they are dramatic. And the numbers don't look insane because he just never misses games. He is always in. And I think people don't understand how much the center helps in pass protection and pointing out what the offensive line is going to run. Is it going to be a 4-man slide? Is it going to be a 3? Are we full sliding? He's the one that helps out with protection so much that it goes underrated. Centers are incredibly underrated, but you can see what a great center does for an NFL offense. You can look at what Jason Kelce did for the Eagles, what Frank Ragnow did for the Lions. You can see what Creed Humphrey and Tyler Linderbaum came in and did for the Ravens. So they're asking a lot of these young guys who could potentially step in. It seems like Tate Ratledge is going to be their starting center, which I'm optimistic about. He's going to be a tall center. He's like 6'7", but he's got the build, he's got the demeanor, and he's going to be next to Christian Mahogany and Graham Glasgow, who Glasgow is a vet. He's going to be a guy who's played center before. So I'm a little optimistic, but the radar's up for the Lions offense, especially with Ragnow gone.
So I think the thing that also needs to be mentioned is they also lost Kevin Zeitler as well. So Ragnow's gone, Kevin Zeitler's gone. So the strength of what we saw as the core there's a little bit of a shakeup. However, it's on the interior. And what did Minnesota and Chicago do this year? Chicago went and got Grady Jarrett. Minnesota went and got Jonathan Allen. And Green Bay has always had Kenny Clark. So the interior of that line is going to be tested a lot this season.
And you can see how the opposing offenses in their division have went out and got good centers to help their young quarterbacks kind of ease into the NFL game. The Bears went out and got Drew Dahlman. The Vikings went out and added Ryan Kelly to kind of help JJ McCarthy. Having a good center, or at least a veteran center, to help ease the transition of a young quarterback is going to maximize them so much. And really, I'm fascinated by the Jared Goff portion of all this. Now, it's on him to set the protections to kind of, I guess, make up for where the offensive line lacks, which is going to be something that he hasn't really been asked to do very much in his career. But this Jared Goff that I've seen in Detroit has been the most confident, the most capable Jared Goff we've gotten in his career. So I'm optimistic about what Goff can do behind this offensive line, but don't be surprised if they start slow.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And I think also just the fact that you're breaking in a new offensive coordinator too. So we know the offense is going to be similar. They're not going to make drastic changes, I don't think, to the actual offense, the philosophy and how they run it. But it's still a new offensive coordinator in your earpiece. And now you've got a young center in front of you that, like you said, there's going to be more responsibility on Goff while trying to learn the tendencies and the philosophy of this new offense coordinator. So it's definitely going to be some changes. And like you said, maybe some red flags here for this Detroit Lions team. Now, you wrote an article recently about the Jacksonville Jaguars offseason, and you're pretty high on some of the moves they've made, and especially from the personnel standpoint, the staff overhaul. It leads the way in the 2025 season offseason grades for you. What changes in scheme or culture are expected, or at least you think, from this new coaching group?
Man, where do I even start with this coaching group, with this personnel? I am super excited because it feels like the cons have finally thrown their weight around in the NFL. For a long time, the Jaguars were always a team getting stepped over. They were the team getting stepped on. Now they're kind of throwing money around. We're going to take one of the top offensive coordinators in the NFL. I believe the Bucs were second in explosive plays in the NFL last season behind the Ravens. You can expect some of that explosiveness and some of the creative packages that Liam Cohen used in Tampa Bay. You expect them to bring that to Jacksonville. Some of the really cool run designs and screen game, I kind of expect that to come over from Tampa Bay. But mostly what fascinates me about this Liam Cohen pairing is the fact that he was able to maximize what Baker Mayfield did well and really masked what inefficiencies that he had. And I think that's going to really help Trevor Lawrence. I think he's going to help kind of streamline his process to make sure he doesn't have to do every single thing in this offense to make sure it's perfect. But I'm super excited about personnel. I think the James Gladstone hiring was really questionable at first because you're hiring a 34-year-old GM. But ever since that moment, he has done nothing but prove that he deserves at least a shot at this role in the NFL. I mean, making that swing for Travis Hunter is something that not a lot of first-year GMs do. It felt like it was coming right out of a movie. So I'm excited for it. I want to see it in action because you can see what their process and what they're trying to build.
So I'll say this. They have exciting players. There'll be a team that I would want to play with in Madden. In the NFL, the personnel where I think they're missing the most is that offensive line. And they addressed it with some backups, not necessarily starters, big-time starters. Patrick Milwaukee, they brought in, but now they're starting Walk a little. So I think what you're saying is true. Obviously, Brian Thomas is a guy. Travis appears to be that he could, however they want to use him, he's going to be a part of the offense. We know they have Bigsby. We know they have Etienne. Even whichever one is going to decide to stay healthy is going to be healthy. So there's that. But then, to me, there's this problem that I can consistently see with the offensive line. And then the number one issue, Trevor Lawrence issue, is who is Trevor Lawrence? The measurables off the charts. He got the grade. He got the John Elway, Andrew Luck checkmark grade as a prospect coming out. We've seen the flashes, but now we're in year, 4 or 5? And, what was that, year 3, the last play of the game, as opposed to trying to make a play? He threw the ball out of bounds. He threw the ball away on a play that could have put them in the playoffs as opposed to trying to make a play. I want to know how dialed in is he and Liam, and how engaged Liam can keep him within this game plan, because they have weapons. They have weapons galore, right? I don't like the offensive line, but if you're talking about the actual skill sets, if everybody's healthy, they have probably a top 5, top 7 room of skill set people on offense. Defensively, we have to see what Anthony Campanelli is going to do, because Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen were excellent when they were in the 3-4, but then they fired that staff and they went to a 4-3 and everybody took a step back. So I want to see what type of defense he's gonna put in this year. And then the key thing overall is obviously going to be Trevor Lawrence. How dialed in is he? Same questions I have with Kyle Pitts is like, how dialed in, and at his position, the most important one is like, how dialed in are you to understanding what you need to do to push this team forward and be consistent?
I think the thing with the defense is critical because, like you said, they went to a 4-3, they kind of took a step back, and really, Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker took a step back because they're playing so much heavier. Josh Hines-Allen last season said he was playing at 285 pounds, which is an ungodly number for a guy like him. He was at his best around 265, 270. So having him add 15 to 20 pounds for one season, you could see that both he and Trayvon Walker came to the league 270, 275. So I can't imagine what they asked him to gain weight up to. So you could see that they both lost a step when it comes to quickness. But I think what Anthony Campanile is probably going to bring is a lot of the versatility that a guy like Jeff Hafley ran in Green Bay, where you had guys like Edgerrin Cooper as basically an added-on blitzer. I think towards the end of the season, last season, they really majored in Tampa 2, trying to get to all these different cool looks at a simulated pressure advantages. So I'm cautiously optimistic for the defense, but I agree with you with Trevor Lawrence. It comes down to consistency. He is streaky right now. I think he is great when he's locked in. You can see he'll fire off a stretch of 3 of the best throws that you'll see all season. But it's now about the snap to snap. It's about the game to game consistency. And I think that getting Liam Cohen around him and kind of streamlining his process will help maximize the things that he does best, because consistency was also part of Baker Mayfield's issue. So if he can get the most out of Trevor Lawrence like he did Baker Mayfield, and I think Trevor Lawrence is a more talented guy than Mayfield, this offense should skyrocket regardless of who they have blocking up front.
Yeah, quite frankly, he's more talented than about 90% of the quarterbacks in this league. It's just, can he unlock it and become the guy, similar to like we said with Pitts, can he become the guy that we all thought he would be coming out of college? Now, speaking of college football, let's shift gears here, because you wrote an article recently about 5 transfers that you think could boost their 2026 draft stock, similar to what we saw from Cam Ward after he made the move from Washington State to Miami and really flew up the draft boards and became a number 1 pick. Let's talk about some of these guys here. You mentioned John Mateer out of Oklahoma, Isaiah World out of Oregon, David Bailey for Texas Tech, Nick Anderson at LSU, and Noah Thomas for Georgia. Let's just start here, because you mentioned that draft angle here. Who do you think has the best chance to be a first-round pick out of this group?
I think if I was picking a guy that's most likely to be a first-round pick, I would go with David Bailey from formerly Stanford, now at Texas Tech. Just a super powerful edge rusher. I think that when he gets his hands on you, most times the offensive lineman is falling backwards or to the side. I think he needs to develop a little bit more of a pass rush plan, but he has the versatility to drop in coverage. Stanford did a lot of weird stuff with David Bailey, where they're playing him at off-ball linebacker, have him run man-to-man with tight ends, and that's just not his game at all. So I think getting him into more pass rush opportunities is really going to help him out a lot. But outside of him, I think Isaiah World has all the measurables to be a first-round pick. 6'8", super long, great movement skills. And at Oregon, if you're a great athlete at offensive line, they will play you, and they will play you often. We saw what they did with Josh Conerly Jr. Isaiah World's going to step right in there, and I think his athleticism is going to really stand out. But the guy that I'm most fascinated by in terms of being a first-round pick is probably John Mateer. I mean, we saw Cam Ward take this same angle to going from being a star at Washington State to going to a bigger school and then finishing up as a first-round pick. I think Mateer is a little chaotic right now. He's got a lot of Bakerisms to his game, both in a good way and a bad way. But if he can just cut down on some of those chaotic plays, cut down on a little bit of those boneheaded decisions. I like to say that John Mateer plays the game like he just drank 4 Red Bulls. If you just drink 1 Red Bull before the game, it's fine. We'll live with that, but you can't go overboard. Yeah,
sometimes I'm not sure if it's 4 Red Bulls or 4 shots, but you're right. He does have some Baker to his game, and here he is at Oklahoma, a bit of a gunslinger, but a guy who's going to make some wild plays, though. He's going to make some wild plays, so I love this article here. I think it was a lot of fun to kind of see that angle, because we know how important the transfer portal has become and what it can do for these guys. Now, what I'm most excited to talk about here, you did a Big Ten ranking, evaluating each team, ranked each team in the Big Ten. Let's talk about it here. Bunch of teams I want to kind of get to here. I want to start with Illinois at number 4, because I think that might have raised some eyebrows for people reading your article. But look, I'm with you, JP. This is one of my dark horse teams in this conference. I like the direction they're headed here. What are you seeing that others might be missing here with Illinois?
My one thing I would tell the teams playing Illinois, do not mess around, because you will find out very quickly what this Illinois team is about. It was the purest distillation of a Brett Bielema team. They're going to run the piss out of the football. I am a little worried about some of their transfers out at running back, but they return all 5 of their starters on the offensive line. They have to replace Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin, which is going to be really tough. But when you bring back Luke Altmaier, who flirted with the NFL, he almost portaled out after the Nico Iamaleava situation happened. But you keep Luke Altmaier around. You keep a lot of the starters from the defense. You keep your offensive line. I think the biggest thing going into college football now is having continuity is going to really separate teams. And Illinois has continuity. I wouldn't be surprised if this team if this team beats a lot of teams they shouldn't. They have the makeup of a pure Brett Bielema team, which is we're going to make it hurt playing us.
JP, who's one team outside of your top 5 in your Big Ten rankings that you think can make a serious run by November?
I'm kind of calling my shot here. I'm very nervous about what this team is going to look like, but I'm a big fan of what Washington has. I think keeping Jonah Coleman is really good. Denzel Boston has a chance to be the best receiver not named Jeremiah Smith in the country, outside Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams. Damon Williams, who is the new quarterback, he started as a freshman after Will Rogers went out. He showed a lot of potential last season. Losing both coordinators really kind of sucks for them, but you bring in Ryan Walters, who probably did his best work as a coordinator of the defense at Illinois. So you also can have some of that experience in play calling. You bring in Jacob Manu and Takario Davis from Arizona. I'm a big fan of the talent that Washington has. I'm curious to see how they put it all together. I want to see if Damon Williams can really take some of those flash plays that he had and turn it into consistency. But I'm a big fan of this team. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people.
Yeah, Alex, I don't know if you remember, I was watching Washington late last year. I can't remember who they were playing. It was like a late kickoff, and I texted you, watch this kid next year because he reminds me of a young Kyler Murray. That's the quarterback I see at Washington, just really elusive, undersized, but just a really good athlete, really elusive, and can really make plays off script. So I'm excited to kind of see what he does there too. That's a very interesting team. Now, you mentioned Aidan Chiles, one of the most fascinating players in the country, a guy that I'm pretty familiar with out here in the Northwest, who was at Oregon State, was a big-time recruit at Oregon State, and then followed Jonathan Smith to Michigan State, kind of waiting to see him take that next step this year. And I think that's what you're looking for too this year. What makes him so intriguing in this Michigan State system for this 2025 season?
If you're just looking at physical talent, Aidan Chiles might be one of the most talented quarterbacks in college football. From the size to the wiry arm to being one of the best running quarterbacks in the country, I think he has all the tools, and I think he shows in flashes a combination of that accuracy. I think it shows a lot of the arm talent. It's just now trying to build something around him where he can be more consistent. They got ravaged in the portal this offseason, but you're able to keep Nick Marsh, which is really going to help him. But I just want to see him progress a little bit as a passer, especially in the intermediate game. But if he's able to kind of add more tools to his golf club, I wouldn't be surprised if he makes a big jump into a lot of people's 2026 QB rankings, because the tools, the athleticism are all there.
All right, I want to talk about some of these big programs here. Look, we had USC beat writer Alicia De Artola on recently, and I'm going to ask you basically the same question as I asked her. How much pressure is Lincoln Riley under this season to really prove that he can still be a top-tier coach in the Big Ten? Because I think that seat is starting to heat up here, and I'm wondering how much more patience does USC have with this rebuild?
So you guys know the Stadium Pulse in College Football 25. The Stadium Pulse for Lincoln Riley is really hot right now. It is shaky because the transition to the Big Ten did not go smoothly at all. I think their lack of size really showed up against a lot of teams when they just weren't as physical. And that goes back to coaching. Like you can coach physicality in the teams. And I think Lincoln Riley's teams have this stereotype, this mantra of lacking physicality. This is a big year for Lincoln Riley. I think losing all the guys that he did, especially Miller Moss to Louisville, I think Jaden Mayala steps in. He is another one of those very chaotic quarterbacks. You also lost a lot defensively, but this team also reflected what they are in the draft. I think they only had 3 draft picks. UCLA was terrible and had 5. That's a reflection of the recruiting, of the talent on both teams. So it is important. And I think Lincoln Riley knows how important of a year this is. He's starting to do a lot more recruiting in the California area, starting to clean up there, which is a good sign for USC. But this team needs to win some games, and they need to win some games now.
Yeah, the funny thing you said there is that he's now recruiting in the California area. Like, California is a top 3, depending on where you want to rank between them, Georgia, Florida, Texas, and Florida, or whatever else. Like, you should always be recruiting. You're in LA. Like, you have all of these schools right there, and here comes Oregon poaching everybody from your area, and not to mention everybody else coming west and poaching those guys to leave as well. So the fact that even has to be mentioned lets you know that seat is on fire.
Michigan, we know they landed Bryce Underwood, monster recruit at quarterback, but they did lose a lot on this roster. Do you think this team is still a contender? Could they be a sneaky contender, so to speak, in the Big Ten? Or do you think there's a real drop-off coming?
I want to believe in this team. I think Bryce Underwood, from what he showed in high school, can be the guy that they expect him to be. And I think that he's going to start right away. So that's a really big reflection of him. But you lose 2 top 15 picks at defensive tackle. You lose 2 running backs. You didn't really address the receiver room in the portal. So I'm just left wondering, what's the plan here for Michigan going into this season? It just throw Bryce Underwood out there and let him figure it out, because this is not the team. This is not the group of skill position players that you want to go figure it out with. I think having some of the returning starters like Jayshawn Barham, having Derek Moore back on the defensive line in the front 7 is going to really help. But I have serious questions about how they're going to move the ball outside of, hey, Bryce, go out there, do something cool.
Right, and if I'm Michigan, I'm not throwing Bryce Underwood out there right now. I just simply can't. I know. Well, who knows what they would do at the quarterback position? We saw what happened last year. It was a round robin of crap. But for the most part, you've got to protect that That's a big investment. You got him away from LSU. This is a guy you don't want to play around with, especially now that the transfer portal is, and at a moment's notice, anybody can get out of there.
Yeah, and it's concerning because I don't know what's going to happen on the offensive line. You only added Justice Haynes to the running back room. You lost Colston Loveland, who was the top target on this team. It's not looking great for the offense. And as I was doing the rankings, I was like, man, I want to put this team higher, but I just don't have any faith in what that offense is going to be.
Yeah, a lot of question marks for Michigan. Absolutely. Now, Ohio State, you called out Ryan Day and Matt Patricia as big question marks. Is that enough to drop Ohio State below Penn State? Because I see you have Penn State ahead of them right now in your rankings.
I am worried about the Ohio State brain drain, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Jim Knowles is the best defensive coordinator in college football right now. He goes to Penn State. You bring in Matt Patricia, who has never called plays at the college level. So you're bringing an NFL guy to call an offense. Are you going to ask Ryan Day to call plays again? Because the reason why he brought in Chip Kelly, the reason why they won the national title last year is because he gave the play calling reins up to Chip Kelly, and he did more of the managerial stuff through the game. I'm curious just about what's going to happen with play calling. As much as who's going to play quarterback for this team is going to be a big question mark, I'm really worried about who's going to be calling plays, because the last time we saw Ryan Day calling plays, it was still effective, but they didn't reach the ceiling that they wanted to. They didn't win a national championship. The last time we saw a team without Jim Knowles on the sideline, this defense wasn't great. So the last time we saw Matt Patricia calling a defense, it didn't look very good. He spent last season talking on TV with Bill Belichick. I just have a lot of questions about this coaching staff, and we're not going to find out until they take the field.
So, like I said, you have Penn State at number 2. You said this might be their year. Now, we know Jim Knowles, to your point, was an incredible addition. They bring back one of the best quarterbacks in college football. It's a really good team. I don't know how much I trust James Franklin in a big game, quite frankly, still. I know he won a couple playoff games, but let's face it, those were mismatches on paper. So how much trust do you have in them to kind of take this big step now that they squarely have a lot of pressure coming into this year? They're a team that people are expecting to make a real run at this.
There's a lot of pressure, not only on James Franklin, but on Drew Aller. I think now without Tyler Warren, the offensive line still is a little shaky, and you're relying on transfer receivers Trevor Pena from Syracuse, Kyron Hudson from USC, both guys that showed flashes, but were not the driving forces of offenses. So you're going to be relying a lot on Aller creation and the run game. And I just don't know how far Drew Aller, I don't know if he can make some big steps up with his consistency as a passer and the ball placement as a passer. I think that's going to really help him out. But like you said, this is the put up or shut up year for James Franklin. This has got to be it. Like I said in the story, if this isn't the year for Penn State, I don't know if they get it done, because everything is lined up for you not only to compete for a national championship, you have the inside track. You brought all the people, you brought all your returning stars back. You brought Danny Dennis Sutton back. You brought both running backs back. It has to be it. But like you said, is James Franklin ready for the moment?
So let me ask a question then. Let's just say they lose 3 games, and then they lose in the first round of this playoff. Does James Franklin's seat begin to heat up? How secure is he?
I think that it begins to heat up because this was supposed to be it. You went out and got Jim Knowles. You did what Ohio State did last season and couldn't win the big one in this situation like Ohio State did. At this point, like, there's nobody else to blame. We can't go out and say we didn't recruit well enough. We didn't have the right coordinators. We didn't have the right quarterback. It's squarely on James Franklin. So if they don't do it this year, I think there are going to be major questions asked about James Franklin, but it's going to be tough. I still think Oregon's going to be very good. I still think there are a lot of feisty teams in the Big Ten, but this team is talented. This team has the coaching, and they brought back Andy Kotelnicki to be their offensive coordinator. You brought everything back. This should be it for Penn State.
Yeah, absolutely. And last year they lose to Ohio State, they lose to Oregon, but I don't think anybody expected them to beat those teams. I think this year it's completely different. You're looking at Penn State as like, look, Ohio State's breaking in, to your point, new coaches, new quarterback. Oregon's bringing in a new quarterback. They've lost a lot of talent. So this is kind of the year for them. Like you said, it's really set up as far as the coaching standpoint, the continuity, and the quarterback situation. There's no reason Penn State shouldn't get over that hump, so to speak, of the top teams in this conference, like an Ohio State and an Oregon. But you mentioned Oregon. You have them at number 1. And I think that definitely surprised some people because, like I said, the consensus is kind of looking at Penn State and even a lot of people still looking at the talent Ohio State has. But you think Oregon is still going to be the best team in the Big Ten this year. What makes you so confident in Oregon despite losing Dylan Gabriel at quarterback, Josh Connerly Jr., like you mentioned, and 8 other players to the NFL? Where's the confidence here for Oregon considering how much they have to replace?
I think the way they've recruited has really helped. The way they portal, like I said, getting Isaiah World out of the portal. They poached an offensive guard from USC. They recruit well on defense. So you have guys like Mateo Uiagalelei ready to step up. They bring back Bryce Fetcher to be on the defensive. I think their cornerback room still has some stuff to shake out, but if Naeem Offord is going to play quickly, then that kind of shores that up. I'm a little worried about how quickly receivers are going to have to step up now that Evan Stewart's going to be out. Keeping Stewart was a big plus, but now that Torres Patella is going to be out for the season, Decorian Moore is going to have to step up quickly, but all this circles around Dante Moore. If Dante Moore can be the guy who showed flashes at UCLA, if you can get those flashes to be consistent, this team's going to be fine. And Will Stein has shown that he can get quality offensive play out of a drop of a hat. So I'm curious to see how he works with this young receiver core and a kid in Dante Moore who hadn't seen the field in a year. But I'm still a believer in their recruiting. I'm a believer in their defense. And if they could still do it with this offense and with Will Stein, that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think Dante Moore is the big question mark here. Like Dylan Gabriel, there was a lot. Obviously, he was short, blah, 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 going into the draft. But for what he was for Oregon was perfect, and he did his job. They didn't win, obviously, in terms of the success of the team. He was a huge contributor, as most quarterbacks are. So I think, to your point, Dante Moore is the number 1 guy that I'm looking at on that team.
Guys, once again, we've been excited to be joined by JP Acosta. He's a writer at SB Nation. Go check out his work there because he covers both the NFL and college football. JP, thanks for coming on the show. This has been a blast.
Of course. Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Pint Glass Football Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at PGF Podcast.